That's as good a place to start as anywhere else, I guess, since everybody's talking about it. Now, most of the audience is like, who? So Olivia Nuzzi is this rising star in the journalism field. She worked for New York Magazine. Prior to that, she went to Fordham, and then she worked for some far-left publication, didn't she?
Beast.
I can't remember
Yeah, she was
which
at the
one.
Daily Beast.
Daily Beast, okay. Yeah, Daily Beast. And she got a job working for New York Magazine. She's got, sort of a flair with the pen and the storytelling, in my view. I enjoy reading her stuff. She was one of the few reporters to come out and report on what she saw around Joe Biden's mental infirmity prior to the election. It was late in the game, don't get me wrong, but it was prior to the election and prior to the debate, I should say. Right? Wasn't it? Was it prior to the debate?
Yeah, I think so.
It was right around there. Right after the debate. Okay. In any event, there weren't that many leftists who were willing to write about what they saw in Joe Biden. She was one of them. But then it came out that she was having an alleged affair with Bobby Kennedy. They're calling it a digital affair, which sounds wrong. But what they mean by that is no in-person interludes, like phone sex, basically. Forgive me, audience. And that basically her career wound up taking a massive hit because Kara Swisher, as the reports have it, went to the head of New York Magazine and said, Olivia, one of your reporters, is having an affair with RFK Jr, whom she profiled, which is what makes it professionally very dicey. And she got turfed from New York Magazine. They fired her. The story has another wrinkle because she was engaged at the time to political writer Ryan Lizza. And they'd been living together. And he did not go quietly into the night when all of this happened. She wound up filing for a restraining order against him in court, accusing him of taping her and, stalker-esque behavior. He denied all of it and said, she's the only one who's done anything wrong here, not me. And she wound up withdrawing her motion for a restraining order. He points out without any proof of her allegations against him. So he feels, and to use his word, that he's been defamed by her without evidence and that people are still walking around with this idea that he somehow did anything wrong, whereas he says, I'm the victim. I got cheated on by, my fiance. I thought I was going to marry. RFKJ came out at the time and said, I don't even know her. She just profiled me one time and apparently has developed a stalker-esque interest in me. And I don't know what this is about. I did not ask Cheryl Hines about this when she came by my set to promote her book because it just felt very rude and untoward. And if this is true, how is it Cheryl's fault? Mm-hmm. Maureen, my pal Maureen, our fellow star on the MK Media Network, Callahan, she would beg me right now to make the point that her reporting is that Cheryl and RFKJ got together when he was still married to his previous wife, Mary, I think her name was, who was having severe, mental issues. And she was basically being driven crazy, I think in part, according to Maureen, by some of Bobby's actions. And so Maureen is very unforgiving of Cheryl too, because look, there is that old saying, you lose them how you get them. You lose them how you get them. So and there's another report that Ryan Lizza was with somebody else when he got together with Olivia. So once again, you lose them how you get them. I don't know whether this is true. That is in the news today that he allegedly, people on Twitter are saying, you can't play the victim. You cheated with her on somebody else. Forgive me, Ryan Lizza. Do not know whether that's true, but that's what the folks are saying. If you deny that, we'll report that too. So this is a very tawdry mess. But Olivia has just gotten rehired by Vanity Fair to write for them. And she's also releasing what appears to be a sort of memoir called American Canto, C-A-N-T-O. She's moved to L.A. She was in D.C. She's moved to L.A. and she was in New York for a time too. And this book sort of juxtaposes between her life as a political reporter on the trail, covering Trump, covering all, these big presidential races, and her obvious allegations that she had an affair with Bobby Kennedy, which, by the way, I've got to just be honest, I buy entirely. I really have zero doubt it happened. For the record, I have to tell you, he's denied it. But it's just ridiculous. It's so detailed. Like, she'd have to be a true lunatic to say all this because she would get sued so quickly for defamation. And if he were innocent, he would sue her. If you think of it, if you're Health and Human Services Secretary and you're a married man and somebody's coming out, a reporter saying all these things with you and not a word of this is true, you would absolutely sue her. But you wouldn't if it were true and you knew she had your text messages and so on. I don't really care. I got to be honest. Like, I think half the people we have in office right now have probably cheated on their spouses. And I just like post Me Too, Emily. I'm kind of like, oh, it's their business. It's hard enough to find, great politicians. It's not ideal. It's not something I would choose, like it's wonderful, but like, I don't know. I've kind of given up on these fights. I used to be much more interested in them. And now I'm just kind of like, whatever. Can we just find somebody who knows how to govern? And I mean that for Democrats too. I don't think it's great. I certainly don't like when somebody holds themselves up as a paragon of virtue like Doug Emhoff. And then we find out that they've got this kind of a history. Like, please spare me your moralizing. Okay, but we'll get to the end on what Ryan Lizza just did, which adds a brand new wrinkle to the story in 1 minute. But what does this say to you, this whole saga? Because it's like so many topics that we all, and people that we all cover and know of, and an industry that we cover and we know of and we're in intimately. And it just like, it's all anybody can discuss. So what are your thoughts on it, EJ?
Well, this is obviously a sort of an amplified example of the kind of thing that happens behind closed doors, and sometimes not even behind closed doors, in Washington, D.C., in New York, Los Angeles, among very powerful, wealthy people. But I think everybody understood that this was a messy relationship. Certainly everybody in D.C. seemed to understand that this was a messy relationship as it was happening. Ryan Lizza had kids. He was much older than Olivia. And it all just seemed like tornadic the way that they got together and carried out their relationship. But listen, like where I'm from, these would be people you wouldn't want to babysit your children. These would be people that you wouldn't want, around your family or your kids, because the behavior here is just grotesque and sad. And I think, Olivia is talented enough to seem interesting and to sometimes mistake self-indulgence for talent. And she definitely has talent, but there's this, I think, permission structure people who want to be great writers sometimes give themselves, which is, if you are self-deprecating enough, that's license to also be very self-indulgent. And the writing in the Vanity Fair excerpt of the book that was released yesterday, it is so overwrought, and you could just tell that she wants to be great. And I think that's good that somebody wants to be great. She's certainly talented, but I also think younger women, I think Olivia and I are roughly the same age, have been taught that this pain is in some way, and the suffering is some way art in and of itself, and is talent in and of itself. And I just hope she gets better. I hope Ryan Lizza's family gets better, but I also doubt that, because the arc here seems to be going towards something even worse. And based on the allegations that Lizza unfolded in a Substack yesterday.
I know. I mean, it's like, I don't know. Very clearly, Olivia and Ryan Lizza did not belong together. Seems very clear. This was not a good match. And, lots of people handle that bad situation badly rather than getting out of the relationship honorably. They make bad choices, which wind up hurting the other person. And I'm always hesitant to really like completely go scorched earth, again, unless they hold themselves up as a paragon of virtue, because you never know what the other side is. It's like, in my experience, generally somebody does not cheat unless the relationship has really gone bad. Now that can be very, very wrong. Sometimes like really sweet spouses who are very loving and caring and supportive do get cheated on because the other person has got some issue. But, how do we know on the outside? In any event, look, I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying it's complicated to try to analyze these things from the outside. Okay, so she decides, it's very interesting because she never gave an interview about this alleged affair. It was all articles about her. But it was very clear, especially on some of like the Page Six reporting, the New York Post reporting, that she was cooperating behind the scenes. You can usually tell. As the pictures get nicer of the person they're reporting on, you can usually deduce that there's some cooperation. So in any event, weirdly, like her star has kind of risen as a result of it. She's, like her name has been out there. She's kind of painted as a femme fatale. I don't know. There's like intrigue around her. She's stunning, absolutely beautiful woman. And I think she's very talented. People are mocking the writing because it's a little flowery. But I think it's very good. I've always enjoyed her pieces. I appreciate some effort in making political coverage somewhat flowery as opposed to just a punch in the face. For lack of a better adjective, she probably wouldn't like flowery, but you know what I'm saying. She works at the rhetorical flair, and I'll take a little flair, you know? It's too much for our friend Charles C.W. Cook over at National Review, who's not a fan, but that's not a surprise to me. He's English. So now she writes this book, and the excerpt is in Vanity Fair, and we've got some of it here. Okay, first of all, before we get to what's in here, let's go to the Emily Jashinsky dramatic reading from After Party last night. After Party with Emily Jashinsky airs live on YouTube Mondays and Wednesdays at 10 p.m. If you're missing it, you're missing the party. And then you can pick it up as a podcast or a YouTube show, so you can still check it out. But anyway, here's just a little clip of EJ giving her dramatic reading full with the black sunglasses that Olivia wears in her photo shoot on the Vanity Fair spread. Here, watch.
I did not like to think about it, just as later I would not like to think about the worm in his brain that other people found so funny. I loved his brain. I hated the idea of an intruder therein. Others thought he was a madman. He was not quite mad the way they thought, but I loved the private ways that he was mad. I loved that he was insatiable in all ways, as if he would swallow up the whole world just to know it better if he could. Thanks for making me watch that.
It wasn't that dramatic. It was, it was a rereading of what she said.
Tasteful.
And like, well, yeah. Here's one of the opening paragraphs of the excerpt in Vanity Fair that dropped yesterday. I would take a bullet for you, the politician said. He always said that. Please don't say that, I said. I always said that. From his mouth, the bullet theoretical launched the bullet possible. I did not like to think about it, about the armed man at his speech or the armed man who broke into his home. And she goes on to set up this relationship in which she cared about him and vice versa. I loved the private ways that he was mad. I loved that he was insatiable in all ways, as if he would swallow up the whole world just to know it better if he could. He made me laugh, but I winced when he joked about the worm that you just referenced, the brain worm. Baby, don't worry, he said. It's not a worm. A doctor he trusted had reviewed the scans of his brain obtained by the New York Times. He told her he did not still have a brain worm or ever, as far as we know. Okay, it goes on. She does talk about what she loved about him, his blue eyes, her favorite body part of his, which she says was, there shouldn't have been a long pause there. I think his nose, right. His nose. and her favorite of his favorite of hers, which was her lips. And then hold on, I find this is the part that everybody kind of wants to hear about. She writes, she did not care about their 39-year age difference. She said, they both quote, moved through the world with amused detachment and deep sensitivity, contradictions that worked somehow in concert. She writes that despite being sober for decades, Kennedy told her he still uses psychedelics and even smoked DMT, a powerful drug on which people are known to have what feel like near-death experiences. She told him she liked uppers. I told him that I took Adderall. And she writes that she said, I love you, only after he said it first. He called her Livy and wrote her poems. He said he wanted her to have his baby. He promised to take a bullet for her in the part I just read. She, as the excerpt reads in the New York Times profile that just dropped, profiling her in the book, she loved him. She loved the politician, even though she was a political reporter, and he was then a presidential candidate she had written about. She loved his eyes, blue as the flame. She loved that the sight of something as trivial as a rose could move him to tears. She loved his insatiable appetites and his particular complications and particular darkness. They write about a digital affair with Kennedy that revolved around texts and phone calls. The revelation derailed her career, leading to her fire at New York Magazine and a very public explosion of her relationship with Chris Cillizza. Kennedy tried to brush her off, sending her into self-imposed exile in Los Angeles. The book paints a picture of a nation and a personal life for her on fire. She describes the mutual infatuation that consumed her, even if it was never consummated. She's ambiguous in the book, but said in one of many interviews, "We were not sleeping together." But American Canto is far more than bearing witness to Trump world, and about how she believes that warped her just as it warped the country. Okay, that's basically the highlights before we get to Ryan Lizza's response. But I don't know. Am I being too forgiving of this affair? I feel like it's a Kennedy. If I married a Kennedy, I would not be expecting fidelity. I know maybe that's wrong. Honestly, like, especially if when I got together with the Kennedy, he was cheating on his existing wife. Like, honestly, what do people think? I just, like, if you're going to marry somebody who's cheated on other spouses and you're cheating with him when you fall in love and then you marry, like, what do you think is going to happen? You know, it's like some people have these deals. This is not my deal. This is not what I want, for my relationship, my children's relationships. But some people do have these deals where it's either implicit or explicit that they're going to look the other way.
Mm-hmm. And again, to the point that you were making, without knowing what's really happening, I mean, even the book refers to him as just the politician. And so it's very intimate, but also sort of detached in a way. And we don't have his side fully. We don't have the full details. We never could. We can't go back and, be in their social circles and know exactly what was going on behind the scenes. But I will say, I do think it's interesting that Olivia told the New York Times, she kind of demurred when asked whether she had the text messages because RFK says this was basically unrequited, that she was sending him, as you mentioned, Megyn, text messages, sexual types of text messages. It is hard for me to believe she would do that without it being requited, because what an insanely risky thing to do to a man who is as high profile and powerful and married. But she also told the New York Times she seemed to say she wasn't going to be releasing any of these text messages, and that she kind of said maybe she doesn't even have the text messages. And then Liz's story sounds a lot like RF Kennedy Jr.'s story, which is that she was texting him all of the time. So again, I just don't know. I genuinely don't know what's true. It's not hard for me to believe, on the one hand, given Kennedy's history, even with his deceased wife, that was very public. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, certainly. One other thing I wanted to add, though, is also that as talented as I think Olivia is, she does moralize, and she did a lot in Trump 1.0, and that's part of what bothers me about this story. I remember the time she held up her phone playing crying migrant children during a White House briefing in Trump 1.0, and the entire media hailed her as like this brave hero. I think as the administration went on, she kind of learned to have more detached bemusement and a little bit of fun with it. But her and Ryan Lizza both are sort of anti-right people who have held themselves up as responsible journalists and criticized a lot of people on the right for a long time.
My friend just lost her ring. She went to replace it. She realized it was a gold ring. The price of it has gone up 25% since she bought the ring a year ago. That's because gold is on the march upward. And it is the one time of year that Birch Gold Group gives away free gold with every qualifying purchase. That's right, for Black Friday, when you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold, Birch Gold will send free gold to your home for every $20,000 purchased. Gold started this year around $2,600 an ounce. By October, it was over $4,000 an ounce. Why? Global uncertainty. 2025 has been defined by trade wars, central banks are pulling from the US dollar as the global reserve currency, and military tension continues to build. Gold thrives in times of uncertainty, and if you are looking to diversify your savings, Birch Gold can help you. Plus, now through November 30th, get free gold, with a qualifying purchase. Just text MK to the number 989898 to claim your eligibility and for a free info kit on gold. But your opportunity for free gold with purchase will end on November 30th, so don't wait. Text MK to the number 989898 for full details. Message and data rates may apply. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.